Okay, well, thank you all for coming to this Media Day open house. It's kind of just a collaboration of efforts to try and foster interest in all of our programs and kind of raise awareness because we have this building, so we might as well do things with it, right? So we decided to have this panel about what is newsworthy, what's the point of having all of these outlets? What do we talk about? What is the news? So that's kind of why we're here. So thank you again for coming.
I'm Colin Vitale. I have been a TCTV news anchor for 2 years now.
I'm Caleb Stright. I'm the editor of the Record Argus here in town. I've been the editor for about 5 years now, and I've been at the paper since 2005.
I'm Bob Batchelor. I'm a professor.
Ronell Hunt, TCTV, 2 years of meteorology, I guess, in a way. But mainly with our radio station, WXTC, I'm the station manager for that, so for our radio station.
I guess it's back to me. So my name is Bree Tiedemann, and I am the media board manager for our student government. And I also worked with the Talencian for a few years when I was an underclassman, and then I interned with the Record Argus and moved my way up to a freelance reporter. And I'm also the programming director of TCTV here at Teal. So I have a lot of experience under my belt. So as far as newsworthiness goes, we're going to all tell us our own sort of versions of newsworthiness. And when I was in high school, one of the first things that I learned was newsworthiness kind of has 5 elements. And those include timing, significance, proximity, prominence, and human interest. And so obviously timing is the first one. And if a story happens, today, it's relevant, it's newsworthy. But maybe if it happened like 5 years ago, people probably aren't talking about it as much, unless it was historically significant. So that kind of brings me to the next point, which is significance. And that kind of goes a long way. Like, how many people are affected by an event? How significant is it? So if you have an event that maybe happens in Greenville, and it affects the whole community, maybe negatively, maybe positively, that's going to be more significant. The more significant it is, probably the more coverage it'll get. Proximity has to do with geographical things, which is important for any sort of local media and national media as well, because you're going to cover a small community or a larger community, and the more closer the story happens to you, then the more proximity goes into play. So, like, for example, one of the big topics right now is Ferguson, Missouri, and that's 620 miles away from here, and that's where an unarmed teenager was killed by a police officer, and that might not affect us as much as the shooting in Brooklyn, because Brooklyn is only 400 miles away. So how close you are to a situation kind of affects how much you care about it as well. The next element I learned about was prominence, and that's kind of what we all are. Like, why does this matter? If you get an A in a course, you might not get a story written about you, but if Princess Kate gets an A in a course, she might get featured on entertainment news or something. So it just kind of depends on your role and what difference you make in society as well. And human interest is the last one, and it's kind of my favorite topic because we all are human, and I think that human interest adds like positivity to the news, because we hear so much about negative stories on TV and negative things like shootings and politics and debates and things like that people are arguing about. But when you add human interest to it, or like underdog stories, it kind of makes it worth watching. So that's, in summary, newsworthiness is a lot of things, like I just said, but really it just matters how much does it affect our lives, and how much will it affect our lives in the future. And that's what I think newsworthiness is.
Okay.
Yeah, Colin, what do you think newsworthiness is?
Okay, well, those are clearly the tenets that anyone who's going to do anything that has something to do with reporting news learns about and makes significant as they report stories. But I think to build on that, especially with proximity and prominence, it news anymore serves a bit of a sociological function, and if there's one thing I've noticed in TV reporting, it's that there is more to watching the news than actually receiving the stories that people report to you. There is the action of watching the news that fills a function and a role in society anymore. And you mentioned at the very end of your point there about how it affects human lives. It itself affects human lives to have people talking about the news as well. So news or things being newsworthy just by that existing serves people as well. It gives them something to talk about, it gives them a way to contextualize society around them, and it essentially brings people together unconsciously. So newsworthiness to me is anything that serves that function and is worth talking about.
Bree, you had some good points there, and I'd like to just kind of expand on a couple of things you said, especially timeliness. Timeliness is an interesting concept in the age that we're working in media and journalism because it's changed a lot. I worked in a newspaper. Previously, timeliness meant getting it out in your next edition, which is 24 hours away. Now, we have to, as a newspaper, we've had to reinvent ourselves to some degree because 24 hours away is not timely anymore. We have to find ways to get our news to our readers and to our public quickly, otherwise someone's going to beat us, whether it be TV, radio, even just someone on Twitter who has seen a bad accident and put it up on the internet. So we have to find a way to compete with those things. The challenge with that as well, though, is the faster you put out information, the less time you have to vet it and make sure it's accurate and make sure you have all the information you need. It's a problem that faces all media. If you watch live coverage of any of the large events, the shootings in Missouri and the killing in Brooklyn, as these things happen live, there's a lot of misinformation that's coming out, and that's something that's difficult because there's two almost contradictory things that you're working with. You want to get things out as quickly as possible, but you want them to be accurate. Something our publisher talks about a lot to help keep us calm in these situations is, do you want to be first or do you want to be right? And usually we try to err on the side of being right. We usually try to give things a little bit of time, make sure we talk to another source, make sure we get as much information as possible before we get it out. It's kind of frustrating because we live in the society we do where everyone wants that information now. They saw it on Facebook, they want to know more about it. There isn't always more information though, unfortunately. I wrote a column about that not too long ago with a lockdown in a school in our coverage area. And when that happens, parents want to know immediately what's going on with their child, what's going on with their school, are they in danger? They want us to tell them, unfortunately, we don't know, and neither do the police at the time. They're still investigating. It takes time for the police to find out, and for the police to get that information out, and then for us to get it out. So we're working in a very challenging time as far as timeliness goes. And proximity was another, I had the exact word proximity in my notes because that's something as a local newspaper we rely on greatly. We have a circulation of about 5,000, which is very small. We work in a very small rural community, and so we are relying on connecting to people based on where they live, where they go to school, who they know, who they're connecting with on a daily basis. There is a lot of value in proximity. If a car accident happens on the George Washington Bridge in New York, are you interested in it? Probably not, but if it happens on your road, it's going to affect how you're getting to work or home, or maybe loved ones involved. It becomes a lot more interesting than an accident far away. So for us, proximity is something that's very important. It also means that we're often reporting on things that maybe inherently might not be as interesting as other topics. We're not always covering murders. Fortunately, there are not a lot of murders in Greenville or Mercer County, but that's what people like to read about, is terrible things happening to other people. Unfortunately, that's murder a lot of times. We don't have a lot of those, so we are focusing a lot on positive things, which can be a good thing as well. I think you mentioned that human interest, things that people are accomplishing and doing. And those are the 2 points that I felt were definitely worth noting.
Okay, so I spend a lot of time thinking about culture and contemporary American culture. So I wanted to think about newsworthiness from not a journalistic perspective necessarily, but who's making news today for a lot of people and how that news is being delivered. It's not any longer just from the evening news or just from the newspaper. I know people who are very intelligent that get 99.8% of their news from Facebook news feeds. And that may be vetted from an actual news source. It could also be your cousin's grandma's opinion on something. In the world of communications, a lot of people in their day-to-day life are getting news that's very specific to them. So they go to a company intranet site because they work for a big company. Then what's newsworthy to them are the things that they need to know right away to get their jobs done. So it could be a memo from your boss. It could be a new product that's being launched and how that news is disseminated, because for the person at that time, what's newsworthy and what's important is what they need to do to get their things done from a 9-to-5 perspective. So I think that technology is always kind of the percolator here, and technology is changing. I think often if we pay attention, we hear about citizen journalists, things like that. We know people are tweeting things. They're tweeting car accidents. That's fantastic. And there's a different kind of change in the way journalism is being conducted. So you have public relations practitioners who are brand journalists. You have people doing company speeches who are executive journalists. Any one of us, because of the technological advances, we could start our own magazine right now. We could start. I saw a website the other day. I mean, it was pretty much you enter 6 keystrokes and you have your own magazine. And millions of people, both professionals using this website and people who just want to keep their family informed. So I think the idea of newsworthiness based on technology has been in some ways obliterated. But I thought I'd think about this a little bit from a cultural perspective. Though I hope the day that there is never a day. I hope there's never a day that newspapers don't go away, because democracy demands a fourth estate. We demand that journalism, we should demand that journalism exists as it has existed. But there are a lot of other people. Good. We're on the same page, definitely, for that. Okay, thanks.
I feel it was newsworthy, and I'm going to speak particularly on radio. Unless you're a nationally known, you're stretching out to numerous states. Certain radio stations, specifically with our radio station, with others that I've worked with, outside of campus, you're only stretching a certain mile radius. With our radio station here, we stretch 25 miles around. With like another radio station I was working with down in Pittsburgh, we're stretching about 40 to 60 miles around. So they're not going to be concerned about, so-and-so, Jolene lost her kitty down in, Canada or something like that. But they're looking for what's going on around them. How is it going to affect them? So it's newsworthy, and particularly with our radio, what we try to focus on is putting ourselves in the mindset of each and every family and household and their plan of thought. So we try to look at, okay, so what would this family over here that they hate hearing about things that are evil. What about this family over here that has 5 kids? How would they feel? What would they want to know if something went on? And we try to look at each and every character in our minds and each and every household of our radius and how that family would feel when we're looking at what type of news we're going to deliver. I feel like, just as I know it's been said before, when you see a lot of things on social media, a lot of it now, it's like the more and more different social media sites get built, the more and more we see online reporters that don't know how to properly form news. You're seeing a lack of depth in news. You're not getting full information. You're getting entertainment news. You're not getting actual sound news. So I think it's important that, you know, sources such as just, you know, listening to the news, listening to radio, and, you know, not like satellite radio where they're barely giving news, just music, music, music. I mean, there's a reason why there's still normal commercial radio, because we're taking time out to try to deliver news, specific news to our areas. You know, with all these other social media sites, we have our normal news, we have our newspapers. These are all outlets that if we use them appropriately, then, you know, it can help us tremendously. You know, for example, there's going to be times where maybe you don't have power, you know. In the comical side, maybe you've got to pay your bill. At least you know the newspaper is going to get dropped off in 2 hours. You got news right there. You know, maybe you have to go out and run some errands. You know, you can tune into this specific radio station while you're in your car and know what's going on, per se, to an area that you're traveling to. So what's newsworthy, what I feel is strongly newsworthy that we're actually lagging right now, is just the depth and like the intake of news and how it's affecting the people or our particular niche audience that we're all trying to reach, no matter what type of social media or no matter what type of broadcast media outlet we're trying to create.
That's a really interesting perspective that you have, Ronald. I never really thought about applying, you know, like kind of putting yourself in your demographic shoes. Mm-hmm. That's what we do essentially, but it's really nice to look at it that way, because it kind of brings us all together as, you know, in any career. That's what you do. Social workers do that, probation officers do that, businesses do that. You know, they want to put themselves in the shoes of their audience, whatever it may be, and I think that's something we can definitely apply to all of our outlets. I like that perspective a lot.